Howdy again everyone, and a rather unusual little zoom lens has recently winged its way into my lens testing situation room, the Tamron 20-40mm f2.8 Di III VXD. It's for Sony E-mount cameras, full frame or aps-c, and it's $700 in the US or £600 here in the UK. I'd like to thank Tamron's UK distributor for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. The lens's zoom range will definitely have a few people scratching their heads, although that's not necessarily a bad thing. Starting at a slightly wide angle of 40mm, it zooms out to a very wide angle of 20mm, so the lens has its toe dipped into the ultra wide angle zone, but not its entire foot if you're shooting on full frame. Even if ultra-wide-angle aficionados feel a bit shortchanged here, still, it's a lovely, useful zoom range you're dealing with, very enjoyable for all kinds of wide-angle uses, but still able to do a touch of subject photography if you zoom right in, and the maximum aperture of f2.8 is a nice little bonus too. The build quality is very typical for a Tamron lens here, even down to their preferred 67mm filter size. Its body is made of plastic, but with a nice brushed finish to it, and it weighs 365 grams, so at under a pound, it's not very heavy. The lens is weather sealed, and it includes a USB port for firmware updates, which Tamron assure me is waterproof too. The zoom ring is rubberized and turns beautifully smoothly, with no stickiness, which is useful for video work. The focus ring above it is thinner and made of plastic, but works very responsively to being turned. As you can see here, the lens exhibits moderate focus breathing, zooming in and out as you change focus, whether the lens is zoomed into 40mm or zoomed out. The lens's autofocus motor is silent and accurate in my tests. In single-shot autofocus mode, its speed is a little pedestrian, but switch over to continuous autofocus mode for some very fast focusing. The lens comes with a plastic hood, and, as I mentioned, its filter thread size is 67mm. It is not image stabilized, but then again, virtually all of Sony's full-frame cameras have stabilization built in nowadays, so that hardly matters. Overall, the build quality is nice here, the lens is small and handy. On to image quality. Judging by the zoom range, it's clearly a lens that's primarily intended for full-frame cameras, so I'll be testing it on my Sony a7R III with its full-frame 42MP sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. At 20mm and f2.8, we see razor sharpness and excellent contrast in the middle of the image. Over in the corners, sharpness and contrast suffer just a little, but not much. f4 looks about the same, but f5.6 and f8 see a touch more contrast. Stop down as far as f16, and softness begins to creep in again due to diffraction. Still, it's a very nice performance at 20mm here. Let's zoom into 40mm then. Again, at f2.8, the middle of the image is fantastically sharp. This time, the corners look noticeably soft, which is a shame. f4 looks about the same, but stop down to f5.6 and the image looks far sharper, and f8 sees excellent sharpness. Well, apart from that corner softness when zoomed in at bright apertures, the lens's image quality is fairly good here, with neutral colours and good contrast. Let's turn off those in-camera corrections then, and see about distortion and vignetting. At 20mm, we see a disturbing pinch of barrel distortion in the middle of the image and very heavy vignetting at f2.8. At f4 and f5.6, those corners brighten considerably. Zoom into 30mm and that distortion straightens out, and at 40mm we see some moderately strong pincushion distortion, but a little less vignetting than before. Again, stop down to f4 and those corners brighten up quickly and considerably. Still, you'll definitely want to shoot with your in-camera corrections turned on with this lens. The lens's minimum focus distance is a very nice 17cm, making it quite useful for getting pictures of, well, small things. At f2.8, the close-up image quality sees a big drop in contrast, but at least a fair bit of detail is still being captured. f4 and f5.6 look much better, so stopping down will benefit you when shooting close-up. Let's see how well the lens works against bright lights now. The good news here is that whether the lens is zoomed out or zoomed in, flaring remains very low and contrast remains nice and high. And while we're working in the dark, let's take a look at chroma smearing. The further good news here is that bright lights in the corners of your image don't really see any of it, making the lens a very nice option for nighttime photography. Let's zoom out now and look for sun stars. Unfortunately, even if you stop down as far as f16, any sun stars here are minimal. And finally, bokeh. This lens can get you some nicely out of focus backgrounds if you move in close to your subject. In my tests, I found that, when shooting at wide angles, the backgrounds looked almost perfectly soft. When zooming in though, just a little outlining would be visible on brighter points of light, nothing too serious though. Overall, well, in terms of image quality, the lens gets a fairly clean bill of health here, and as a wide-angle enthusiast, I really enjoyed using it actually, but the fact remains that a lot of people just won't get that unusual zoom range, and will probably prefer something that goes a bit wider than 20mm, and that's understandable. I'm tempted to call this thing a Marmite lens in that respect, but I can't envision anyone hating it, because whatever your needs might be, it's still a very nice piece of kit. It is worth remembering that shooting wider than about 20mm can actually make it quite challenging to compose your image, so for those who are happy to start at 20, it does come recommended. Well, guys and girls, whatever you might think of this lens's unusual zoom range, as a lens reviewer, I can honestly tell you, I love testing something that's a little bit different. If you regularly watch my videos and find them helpful, and I hope you do, then check out my Patreon page down below. Supporters over there get all kinds of exclusive bonus content and are making a big difference to me keeping this channel going, sponsorship free, because who wants to watch a lens review and get ambushed by me talking about Squarespace or NordVPN? Check it out in the description below, and ciao for now.